is up, everybody? Welcome to the Blended Couple on Fire podcast, season 3, episode 23. Ooh, this is an ugly one today.
My hair is crazy. My hair is ugly is what it is.
No, it's not.
I'm sorry, people.
It's a little frizzy. Today's title is I Don't Like My Stepkids. And that's coming up
right now.
Are you a Christian and you are looking to take your faith, your family, and your future to the next level?
Then this is the channel for you.
Welcome to today's show. Yeah, so if you haven't had an opportunity yet, please hit the share button. We would so appreciate that. So, I don't like my stepkids. No, that's actually not true. Not for me. It's not true, but we have heard it. We completely understand it.
Going around a lot. It seems like
it's been going on a lot. A lot of those Facebook groups, though, so you gotta stay out of them.
Yeah, but even in our own group, or we've had, not that's posted in there, but we've had people reach out to us just saying, we're struggling. They're struggling with their spouse getting along with their kids, which is, their spouse's stepkids, obviously. So we thought that this was an appropriate topic to talk about. So
Definitely. So if you want, you can keep talking because I need to share this and I haven't done that yet.
So I thought it would be appropriate to talk about because a lot of spouses, Josh and I have shared this in many of our episodes, that anything to do with your life, if you're married, it all starts with the marriage first. Supposed to. You have to pray about things, put God at the center of it. And I know that's easier said than done, especially in blended families, because emotions are so high. When you are in a nuclear family and your husband screams at your kids, you don't get the same type of feeling like it's their dad, it's their dad, whatever, type of thing. But when you're a mama bear and your husband, their stepdad starts yelling at them in that way, it's like, type of thing that comes out. So this is definitely a hot topic to talk about. And there's some hard questions that you need to ask yourself.
Yeah, for sure. I think, it does come down to it. And I think a lot of times it's hard for us. So I was talking to a friend today on the phone and I was talking about it's really weird. We have expectations and our expectations are always weird for blended families. So, and your expectations change over years, but in the beginning it's like, oh, I love her so much. I'm going to love her kids because I love her. And we have all these weird expectations and that's just not always how it is. It's just not always that way. Now, is there things that you can do to make the family process much better, to make these things work? It's not always doom and gloom. There is ways to make it work. There just is. And these are the hard things we want to talk about today. It's okay, so what things can we do? If we do feel like I don't like your kids or you don't like my kids, why? What can we do about that? There is things that we actually can do about it. There is things that you can take personal responsibility for in your family, in your blended family, and start putting it into play. And it's hard stuff. It's not easy stuff. So, setting your expectations right in the beginning is an important thing for blended families just in general. I was reading a Ron Deal blog today about that, and it was talking deeply about expectations in blended families. And a lot of times we jump into it just completely rose-colored glasses and just really don't see some of these problems coming. So, all right, you ready to kick it off?
Mm-hmm.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Look like you're about ready to swing on somebody with this lovely arm of hers. So yeah, her shoulder is completely messed up. She goes for an MRI soon, so we're gonna get it all figured out and find out she's bionic, and we just didn't even know it the whole time.
I've just been in constant pain for a week and a half.
She has. Pray for Christy and her arm. Yeah. All right. So the very first thing we want to talk about today is why don't they like your kids? I think that's a great question to ask yourself. Why doesn't my new spouse like my kids?
Or you may just feel like they don't like them. Maybe they're just yelling at them all the time. So
True.
It's just a hard question to ask yourself. Why don't they? I wrote some things down for myself so I could remember, because there's two sides to this that you need to actually be honest with yourself. Are your kids spoiled? Are they entitled? Are they not treating your spouse with respect because they feel that they don't have to? Or is your spouse jealous? Maybe they don't have kids of their own. Are they jealous? Are they struggling with their own personal demons because they would like to have kids of their own and they're, the bonus parent? are you too protective over your kids and they feel like they can't say anything to your kids, so they're actually uncomfortable in their own home because they're not allowed to share feelings about your kids at all, or feeling that your kids are being disrespectful to them? Those are questions that you need to ask yourself. And if your kids are spoiled and entitled or allowed to get away with things, or maybe you just don't discipline them at all, that's stuff that you need to consider as the parent.
Yeah, I think it's really easy for us to look at somebody else's kids and then say, I would never let my kids get away with that.
Right.
But in reality, we're letting our kids get away with this stuff all the time. And I think it's so important that's why we always say that we need to follow the hierarchy of what God says for the family. And that is so important in blended families, even as hard as it seems. It's why it's important. So in the beginning, it's really important that you take your spouse's side first and say, okay, I'm not going to jump on my kid's side, even though it seems unfair right now. I'm going to jump on my spouse's side, and then I'm going to have good conversation and get to the bottom of it. Like, okay, why is it that my spouse is having a hard time with my child? Like, let's figure it out. Now, that doesn't always mean that the child is in the wrong. I mean, sometimes the other parent is in the wrong, and that's very possible. But like Christy said, there's other things maybe going on. There's underlining issues that you need to get to the bottom of it, and your child and your spouse are not going to be able to solve those problems. They just can't. It's not how it works in blended families. You have to solve the problem here and then carry it out to the children inside the home, because a lot of times kids do not respect the other parent. We're going to talk about that in a second, but they don't see the other parent as a parental figure. So they carry out things completely different to that person, and being spoiled or too outspoken. And you feel like, oh, I feel bad for my kid because they're part of this family now, and I'm going to allow them some leeway to be mean and nasty, and I'm going to kind of stay out of the way because I already feel bad. And you can't allow that to happen. It's just going to create a lot of tension between you and your spouse and your children and your spouse.
Well, the honest answer too is the bio parent is going to bridge the gap regardless of what it is. Yep. So if you feel like your spouse is being too hard on your kids or not treating your kids correctly, that doesn't have anything to do with your kids, actually. That has everything to do with your marriage and stuff that you guys have to work out behind closed doors. Now, if your kids are being the disrespectful kids, you need to support your spouse in that aspect. And some ground rules need to be set up on how they should speak or treat or talk to them, to your significant other. That you guys can go behind closed doors and say, okay, if they're disrespectful, what do you feel like is the correct punishment? In our case, Josh was the stay-at-home dad, and 50% of the kids that were in the home were mine. So we had 4 kids, 2 were mine, 2 were his. And if I'm at work and he's disciplining my kids, we needed to work out, which we didn't in the beginning.
We did not.
So my kids, would be telling their dad, Big Josh is mean to me. He's just mean to me. He doesn't treat me right. And then my ex-husband's calling me like, you're not there. You don't know what he's doing and all this stuff. I mean, come to find out, he's just putting them in the corner like every other 10 minutes because my kids were just like super hyper all the time. But that still needed to be talked out and worked out. Like, listen, make them write sentences or make them. So then I still am trusting my spouse because I married him. I need to trust him. I am on the same team as him. Whether we're a blended family or not, spouses and marriages, you're the same team. So you need to have clear-cut guidelines on what that needs to look like for your kids. You can trust that.
Yeah, I think if we went and we did took a poll, right? So we went to a Facebook group to blended families, and we took a poll and we said, in all honesty, women, how often do you think that your new spouse is mean to your children? And I bet every one of them would probably speak up and say, yeah, he's mean. He's mean. And we have to understand there's a lot of things going on here. Number one, the guy feels like he needs to move in and become an authoritative role, right? I'm the man. I'm the leader of the home. I need to get this right, which is not right. How it needs to be done differently, right? He is the leader of the home. There is things, but in a blended family, it's not like a nuclear family. It's not. We have to understand there's different ways to go about it. So guys need to say, okay, wait a minute. This isn't my job. I'm supposed to come in and be the rule. And we have a whole thing we did on parenting styles. This is a parenting style issue too. But the guys don't need to come in and be the iron fist and be like, I'm going to straighten these kids out so these kids act like my kids. Because I understand that's why she's smirking, because that's kind of what I tried to do to a certain degree.
I have a point.
Okay. But, it is to a certain degree. It's like, no, I'm going to run this household the way that it should be ran. And so what ends up happening is the guy ends up being a lot harder on, the woman's kids because they don't act the same way, even if though they may, or may even act better, in those situations. So I think it's important why we say put the spouse first, to have those discussions, to get that type of stuff worked out. What's your point?
My point is, in nuclear families, not always, but the majority of the time, the man is the iron fist. I mean, we all grew up with the mom that was like, just wait until your father comes home, and the kids were like, no. Yeah. So that's what makes it harder in blended families. In nuclear families, the majority, I don't need the women coming on here being like, not me, I'm the iron fist. And okay, I'm talking about the majority. The majority of even nuclear families, the dad is the iron fist, doesn't have the patience, doesn't have the loving thing. So in a blended family, it makes it even harder because men are typically the tougher, more diplomatic one in the family. And especially when you're dealing with younger kids, if their biological dad is still in the picture, they can go back and tell him. And in that bio dad's defense, he's not here. He doesn't know exactly, and kids can embellish. And so that's why you and your spouse have to be on the same page with the things, because the stepdad's probably feeling a little weird too. Like, it is his home. He's the man of the home. God has designed it that way. God, husband, wife. So he needs to be allowed to be the leader of the home. Yeah. You have to support that decision, but you have to be confident and agree with how he's going to be disciplining your kids. Again, that goes back. It's a marriage thing. It's a marriage thing. As long as you guys can work it out.
Yeah, it always is. So you have to ask yourself, the first question to ask yourself is, why don't they like my kids? Like, what is going on right now? And I bet you 9 times out of 10, it's not that they don't like each other. It's not that we have a problem with each other's kids. It's that we have a problem with the way things are being handled. And that is a marriage problem. That's not a parenting issue. So that's number one.
Maybe your kids are brats.
And I mean, kids are brats to a certain degree. All kids are brats. And we, as bio parents, we put up with a lot of garbage. We're like, oh, our precious little baby. Well, not, no, your kid's a brat and your kid is hateful and mean.
Well, you see it differently.
You do.
Like, if my kid did something and your kid did the exact same thing 5 months later, I wouldn't feel the same about it, just naturally, not on purpose.
Yeah.
Like, if your kid would do something, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that little heathen, I cannot believe. But if my kid did it, I'm like, oh, he's probably struggling.
Yeah. He's tired.
Yeah. It's just the way that it is. It is just,
it's true, isn't it?
The way that it is.
It is. And that's why it's important that you slow down and you talk to your spouse about it. If you see that your spouse that you feel being mean. Now, a lot of times we have to be very careful because being mean is very subjective.
Yes.
Like, oh, you're being mean. Like, I'm not being mean.
You may think they're being mean because you don't discipline your kids at all.
Yeah, right. And that's true, right? And that's the whole point, though, is you have to be open-minded and say, like, no, we need to have continued discussions about this. You may not solve it in one discussion, but make sure that you don't keep telling yourself, they hate my kid. This person hates my kid. They love me, but they hate my kids. And that's not it. It's a big communication issue is what it comes down to.
Well, and it also goes back to if you guys are in your marriage and you don't allow your spouse to have a say, like if it's something continuously, like it's all the time, if it's all the time your spouse is upset by the way that what you're allowing your kids to get away with or the way that you're disciplining your kids, that's a huge thing. Like, it's not fair. Already, I screenshotted something as a step parent to keep in my phone today because we just shared it on one of our pages. But you're already grieving some. It says, being the bonus mom or dad sometimes means you don't get the first seat at the table and you'll have to grieve this. And it is true. The step parent already doesn't have a seat at the table. It's the bio parent's job to say, this is my marriage. My marriage comes first.
So true.
This is our household. And if my spouse is constantly upset because of the things my kids are getting away with, that is a me problem then. If it's what we do consistently that counts. And if it's a constant thing, that's me then. And that's something that we need to work out because my spouse should have a say in what affects my household when it comes to my kids.
Yep.
So
the second thing we really want to talk about when we talk about like I don't like my stepkids is we really need to discuss the word respect.
Oh yeah, I love this one.
Respect.
I love it. We actually did such a good job after probably the first year in our home because our exes tried to tell our kids so much and make our kids disrespect our home so much because they hated the fact that we were together, that when we finally, it took us about a year, when we came up with the chore board. And this is the things when we finally sat down, we started having family meetings and we started telling the kids, like, listen, we're not saying that you have to, he told his kids, I'm not saying you have to love Christy like you love your mom. And I'm not saying you have to love Big Josh like you have to love him. We're not saying that, but you will respect.
Yep.
If you will not be disrespectful in this house. If you do something that requires a punishment, these are the punishments. We've created the whiteboard so it was clear as day. Everybody was on the same page. If you are mouthy, if you slam doors, if you are doing things that are disrespectful to this home, you will be punished. Now, if you want to be angry, you are little humans. Okay, so if you get in trouble and you want to be angry about something and you're mad about it and you want to go in your room and just be mad, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But you won't slam doors. You won't say things that are disrespectful. That will not be done.
Yep.
And that was a huge turning point in our family unit. It was the respect thing.
Yeah, it was, because it's super easy to not like somebody else's kids. It's super easy when you're in the store and you see a kid that's being a brat or doing something to you, or you're at an extended family gathering and like one of the cousin's second friends or whatever has a kid there and he's being nasty and you just want to go up and spank that kid. You just want to spank that kid.
Or punch him in the face.
Or punch him in the throat.
Depending on his size.
Hard time breathing. So it's really understandable to say, hey, I don't like this kid because this kid doesn't respect me. Well, if you feel like, and this is also subjective, you have to make sure that your spouse and you are on the same page when it talks about respect. Like Christy said, we used to allow our kids to be upset and mad, but there's rules that come with being upset and mad. A lot of times I've watched parents, and I grew up this way too. My parents would be like, smile. You need to put a smile on that face. Mm-hmm. No, I don't care if my kids
cry.
Smile.
I'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah, I'll make you cry more and then tell you not to cry.
Yeah.
And that's so, but the thing is respect comes with rules, right? Like you want to be mad, be mad.
Yeah.
But go to your room and be mad. You're not going to slam things. Yep. You're not going to, you're not going to say nasty things. You're not going to do these things. And when we do, it's so much easier for our stepkids to aim that at us.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're looking at a place to take anger out. We're the first target for them, no matter what. I mean, it was either us, like me, or it was like my children is where the stepchildren would take it out on. So respect has to be a major key thing. And if your spouse is comfortable with the amount that your child is enforced to be respectful because of you, it really changes the way that you feel about your stepkid. It does. It alters it completely.
Mm-hmm. And the kids need to feel safe to come and talk to you about the step parent if they're upset about something. You want them ultimately to end up being comfortable talking about it in front of the step parent, but they need to feel like you will at least hear them out. The majority of the time, kids don't know how to process, adult feelings, right? And their feelings get hurt easy, and they feel like the step parent doesn't have the right because it's not their mom or dad. So explaining it to them like a babysitter or an extended family member, like an aunt and an uncle, you are to be respectful to adults as the parental figure in the home, and that is biblical, respect your elders type of thing, and we're trying to do the right thing by you. That is important because the kids will need to express those feelings. If they feel like I can never go to my mom and talk to her about how Big Josh makes me mad, then they will never talk to me about it. I don't think that my kids ever did feel like that they were allowed to do that. Fortunately, he was the one that was at home with them the majority of the time. And we worked through all these things, and he wanted to be a better man, and we want to put God at the center of everything. So eventually it got to the point where they will say something to him, even in front of me, if they were upset about something.
Yep.
And then he'll work it out with them, or he'll see that they're upset about something and he goes and he addresses it with them and works it out with them and explains it to them and helps them walk through the process. Mm-hmm. He has a lot of patience when it comes to that. I don't, especially when it comes with kids. I struggle with that. Like, I want to go to them and say, what are you feeling? And they start telling me some sob story about that is childish and immature. I'm like, I don't care. Like, suck it up. Life isn't fair,
And that was the face she uses too. So everybody's clear.
So he was a lot more patient about it. And I loved that about him. He's that patient with me, you know, when it came to his kids. So, but respect, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it when people say respect has to be earned. No, that is not what God called us to do. God did not say only respect people that respect you. That is not what it's called to do. And so when we're teaching our kids, we need to be teaching our kids, you respect that person.
No matter what.
No matter what. I mean, we're not talking about the extenuating circumstances of somebody's being beat or someone is in a life-threatening situation.
Right.
The majority of families, you will respect that person. That is what we're called to do as Christians.
No. Yeah, I'm going to read what Stacy wrote because I think this is really powerful and I think it's important. One of the first things I said to the boys was that they already have a mom and I'm not trying to be their mom or replace their mom. Chrissy says this all the time too, just like Stacy's saying, it's important that our children know that. They'll want to respect us if they don't think that we're trying to take place of the other parent, right? Of their other bio parent. We're not trying to take that place. It offers them up a gift of saying, hey, it's all right. Like, I know my place and I'm not trying to take over this, you know, but that doesn't mean that you get the right to disrespect me. And that's why having healthy conversations with your spouse and working out what is considered disrespect and both agreeing upon that and then allowing the bio parent to tell the children with you present, like, okay, these are the things that are disrespectful and these are the lines that you can't cross. And so that sets up a healthy boundaries and healthy rules for you and the children going into it and moving forward. So it's important. Respect has to be had. It really does. Has to be had. All right. The third thing we want to talk about when it comes to saying you don't like your stepkids is you have to decide together. You have to make a decision together.
Yeah. And I think it's most important when it comes to the rules of the home and the discipline of the home. You have to be able to say, okay, if you feel like your stepchild has been disrespectful to you, you need to talk it out with the parent. And I know that seems dumb in the beginning. Like some people want to just be prideful about it and say, I'm the adult and I can tell for myself whether this kid's being disrespectful and I'm going to take care of it. That isn't a proper, healthy way. If you want your family to succeed, you're going to put in the hard work and you're going to do the things in the beginning that it requires. And it took a lot of bathroom talks for us, for me to take him in the bathroom or him to take me in the bathroom and be like, listen, that I do not appreciate that. How are we going to work this out? And eventually, after you have so many of those, it does become a routine then. It does become an expectation. You don't always have to have those talks forever, but you need to in the beginning. A lot of times, every time you feel disrespectful, you have to do that if you want you guys to be successful. Yep. And if you're not willing to put that work in, you need to question yourself. Like, what's wrong with you? Do you want your family to be successful or not? Do you want to get divorced again? I mean, is that really what you want? Do you want to just be like, oh, now things aren't going my way. I'm just going to get divorced. I've done it once. I'll do it again. God forgives all sins. No. Like, you need to make sure that your marriage is successful.
You have to. And it is, I love decide together. And I think that's something that you should always say, am I making a decision? Okay, I need to decide together. Like, it should be something we constantly repeat to ourselves. And so what's going on?
My arm.
Oh, you keep looking back that way.
Yeah,
I think there's something like, is there a
stretch it.
ghost in here and I just don't know it?
No.
I don't know what's happening.
Don't
right
address it. Just go.
Well, keep looking.
My arm
like
is hurting.
Like she's looking behind us like we're driving in a car.
If you're listening to this, I'm sorry, because you would have never saw that and you would have never known.
Anyway, so decide together is an important thing. And I think it is something that we have to constantly remind ourselves that the decisions that we normally are able to make in a nuclear family, a lot of times parents are like, it's so much different in a nuclear family. The decisions are different, are handled differently. But in a blended family, it's like you always have to decide everything together. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do that, there creates this major amount of tension. So if you feel like the other parent is parenting their kids and making all the decisions and you don't feel like you're part of that, you automatically have this feeling of disconnect with everybody, including your stepkids. So making sure that everything is being decided together is so, so important. That is a big part of something that, you know, we're in the midst right now of creating a course that people can take that it's what we call before blending and be able to go through it before you blend. And that's a big part of it, saying you guys got to get on the same page and decide that we're going to talk about and decide on everything together. I understand it's your kids, but this is our family and this is what we're creating. And we need to make sure that these decisions are done together.
Even with the good things though, too. So when Josh and I first started dating, his daughter, I think, was like a junior or a sophomore. I don't remember. But
freshman maybe.
We got her a brand new iPhone, and we got her this really awesome OtterBox case that had the pink, like camo, not camo, but like, I don't know. It was kind of like camo, like woodsy looking thing that she wanted. And we bought it for her. And then I'm at work and he drove up to her school the next day. He went and picked it up, drove up to her school and gave it to her at the school. And this was when we very first were together. And he texted me. He's like, oh man, Jordan loved her present. I took it up there and gave it to her. And I'm like, what? I didn't get to, like, I would want to be a part of that. I would want to give her the present. I would want to see her reaction. And he was like, oh, sorry. Like, he didn't even think about it. It's just what he normally would have done. It's just what he did. And I could have we could have fought for days and weeks about that. I did voice that I was mad about it. And I'm like, I was super hurt about it for a few days. I'm like, I missed the whole present. Okay.
Yeah.
But he was apologetic about it. And he's like, that will never happen again. And it didn't happen again. He always made sure I was able to be present when we gave gifts that were supposed to be from both of us to the kids.
It is important. And it's weird because we don't think of things like that. I think to myself, she's at work, I'm available. I'm just going to take it and give it to her. I'm just going to drive it up and give it to her. But I wasn't thinking like our family. I was thinking my kid. And that's where the distinction needs to be made. Like, okay, that creates a wedge. It can create a wedge, not even on purpose, on accident, And if you allow those gaps to be there, it's no different. And I don't want to get too deep into this, but it's no different. And we can talk about this on a different one, but about finances within your home.
Ooh,
it's like getting together and saying, we're just going to keep separate accounts, and that's a whole different, right? We can chase that rabbit way deep in the hole, but it's just little things like that do make a difference in not allowing things to really come together and really crock pot together and really start to cook together. And that's one of them, is making sure that you guys are together on all decisions. And maybe she wouldn't have cared, but I could at least have called her first and said, hey, I'm going to run up and do this. And she'd be like, okay, cool. Or should have been like, no, which she would have been, no, I want to be part of that. And then I would have known, but I don't know that stuff unless we decide together. And so, that way we prevent each other from getting upset at the kids when it wasn't even the kids'
Unless
fault.
You're the female and then he's at work and you call and say, hey, I'm going to run this up to my kid. Is that okay? And then he says, yeah, that's fine. And then you're like, oh, you don't care? You don't want to be a part of it? Because that's the female. That's the female version of that. And they're like, I'm sorry. Yes, I'll be a part of it.
I'm working. I don't have time for this right now.
I'm just kidding.
Got the trap set. Snap. The limp home. All right. And for our fourth and final thing when it comes to you don't like your stepkids is, did you actually for real lose your cool?
So if you lose your cool, you still need to go apologize to the child. And I know that a lot of parents, myself included, until I got with him, didn't agree with that. Because I'm like, no, you do not apologize.
These are just kids.
Well, I had a hard time apologizing in general to anyone. So it was a huge growing for me. And for me, what helped the most is it is my job to teach my kids how to handle life in general. And you will lose your cool at some point in your life. And it's how you respond or what you do after you do that matters. Do you take responsibility? Do you make a sincere apology and really try again in the future to not do it? Or do you lose your cool all the time and then just say sorry and it means nothing to them? That's completely different. But you need to make a sincere apology with no buts on it and say, I should not have handled it that way. Now, if they say, okay, does this get rid of my punishment? That's where the butt can come in. Like,
you're getting the butt.
No, it doesn't take away from your punishment. Just because I freaked out on you doesn't mean because you stole something from the store that you're not grounded for 2 weeks. I shouldn't have screamed and yelled and did those things, but you're still punished.
Do we have any examples of this situation?
Yeah.
She's got a big smile on her face. Yeah, so we talked about it, I think last week or week before on our podcast.
Yeah.
We're Christy's son. We had to got woke up at 2:00 in the morning, had to go pick him up because he got caught smoking pot. And so we were like, had to go pick him up, and we got in the van, and instantly we got in the van, I freaked out all the way home. I just was screaming and yelling, and I lost my cool. I lost my cool. And he wasn't my son, right? But I felt like it was embarrassing. I had every justification lined up. It's super easy now to still feel like I'm justified, but it's wrong. It was wrong, right? So I had to go back first off and apologize to her about it and say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have lost my cool like that. It wasn't right. But then I had to humble myself and go and apologize to him. Like, what you did was not right, but the way that I handled it was also not right. And that's good for us to make sure that our children know that we can go, even in an authoritative position, even as a parent, that we can apologize if we're handling things the way they shouldn't. Now, I will be the first one to admit there's nothing like telling a child 15 times to do something, and every time it feels like they're not listening and it's intentional. And by the time you get to the 15th time, you have every reason and justification to scream and yell, but you don't. You don't. We're not making sure that the children understand things in a healthy way. They're not getting it for some reason, or we haven't set up punishments in a way that's being effective. So that's when we have to go back to our last point, and we have to decide together. We got to sit back together as spouses, husband and wife, and say, hey, this isn't working. I'm not getting through, and it's really starting to frustrate me, and I'm on the verge of losing my cool. I'm about to freak out on this kid, and I don't want to. So we need to talk about how can we handle this moving forward, and you have to do that. It's hard, but losing your cool doesn't do anything but drive a bigger wedge between you and your spouse and your family.
Yeah, and there's many more examples of me losing my cool, not just with his kids, but with my own kids. And he helped me a lot to say, you know, you really should. Because he doesn't say anything. Even for my own kids, I have freaked out on Garrett more times than I would like to count. And he just stands there. He just stands in the kitchen. He doesn't say anything because he doesn't want to undermine me, and especially because it's not his kid. And then we'll be done. And of course, I go in the bedroom and then I'm crying because I'm so mad. I'm so hurt. And I'm so embarrassed that I let him like get me to the point where I lost my cool like that. And he'll come in and I'll be like, was I in the wrong? You know, and there's been many times where he's like, yeah, you probably should go apologize and handle it this way. And nothing is worse than that. When you're the parent and you're trying to inflict punishment on your child, and then you have to go back and be the one to say, I'm really, really sorry. I shouldn't have yelled at you. And I have had to do that with his daughter.
Yep.
I've had to do that with his son. I've had to do it with my son, and I've had to do it with my youngest son. I've gotten to the point. I've gotten a lot better over the years, but there was the first couple of years, maybe not so much on his son, because he was very protective of his son, and that's a whole nother episode. But on the other three kids, I would just freak out and then have to go back and apologize to them that I did that. I had a lot of growth though. Like we've shared before in our podcast, we're both recovering alcoholics. He was 1.5 years sober when him and I got together, and I still was in my alcoholism. So I had to learn for the first time in my life to not be on antidepressants, to not be taking Xanax, to not be medicating myself with alcohol, and to deal with hard emotions and be a parent on top of that, be in a new blended family, have a newly found stepdaughter. So I was going through a lot of things, and I was just like all the time.
Yeah, but you always chose to grow though. And you're like, never made excuses for it. You always wanted to change for the better, which is really hard because it's so easy for us to make excuses. The one thing she's not sharing that actually happened not too long ago is something happened between her and her eldest. And then she instantly called him into the bedroom and like had a private conversation with them. And afterwards she came up to me and she was like, man, that really went well. She's like, I apologized to him. Like, I shouldn't have freaked out on him. And then he started getting super emotional and stuff and saying, you know, Mom, I've really been sick lately, you know, and then we ended up taking him to the doctor and he lost like 30 pounds, which he didn't have 30 pounds to lose. And then he had this huge issue. And so it really was awesome. So, and it wasn't like her and I had to have some type of discussion that time and be like, hey, you really need to go talk to him about that. She didn't. She just did it. She's like, listen, she had him calm in the room and she apologized to him. And then that really opened up some opportunity for her to really talk to him on a whole different level. And that was awesome. That was really awesome.
Yeah, he doesn't cry. My oldest doesn't cry very often. And well, none of the kids really do, but he actually started crying and breaking down and was saying that he just is sick all the time. And he was really nervous about it. And he had been telling us he had a hard time eating. His stomach was upset a lot, but we didn't realize the severity of it until he really started breaking down a lot. And then he took his shirt off, and it was like he looked anorexic.
Like he'd been in a POW camp or something.
Yeah.
Like it was
so
crazy.
My actual apology to him opened up a chance for him to sit just with me and cry and really open up to, he wasn't even worried about that I yelled at him. He was struggling with his own stuff, and he wasn't talking to anybody about it or telling us how bad it was.
Yeah.
And it really brought healing. I mean, he's gaining weight now, so that's good.
And it's important everybody knows in a blended family that in the beginning, okay, and this is something you mature through, but in the beginning, you have to make sure that you talk to your spouse first about all these things in the beginning. But as time goes along, I mean, Kristen and I have been together for more than 10 years now. Now, if I have a problem with one of her sons, I go talk to them.
Yeah.
Because her and I have already ironed out the details of the way that we handle things, the way that we do things. Like, we have a family. Like, we have a family. We understand the rules very well. All of the children understand us. We understand them. So, once you get beyond a certain level, Christy's not worried about me punishing her kids.
Mm-mm.
Like, we don't even punish our kids. Okay, let's just be honest, right?
We don't anymore.
We're beyond all that, right? They're big, right? They're huge. They're bigger than us, right? There's punishment.
I
It's
actually
be
said that
fist
as
fights
a
at
joke
this
to one of them the other day. I think it was Garrett. Like, he's 19 years old, and he said something. He's graduated high school, he's whatever. And I'm just like, well, if you don't do it, I'm going to ground you. And I said it as a joke, but he's like, you're right.
Yeah.
Type of thing, because
No, but it's still like there is still situations where we have to have conversations. And now it's just like Christy will just call my son up and have a discussion with them. Like, she doesn't need to preempt me and say, hey, I'm going to call your son, just letting you know. I mean, she always tells me stuff anyway, and I do the same with her just out of respect of our marriage and our relationship and our family. But as time goes on, there's a lot less of this stuff that you need to do. But if you do it in the beginning and you do it well, then you build trust within each other. And then you don't have to worry about not liking your stepkids or feeling like they're a child that you can't like, And I think that's really what it comes down to. You really feel like you're in a position to where you don't have any power and you have no control. And so then the child's allowed to treat you any way they want. So you really don't have a healthy relationship with them. So that's something that has to be had over time. It takes time to do that.
Yeah. And it should get to the point where you guys are like, I am tired of having this conversation.
Yeah.
Because we said that so many times where I would let something go for a week or 2 weeks because I'm just like, I just don't want to have the conversation right now. I don't. And I know eventually that we need to have it instead of pushing it down and letting it fester until I blow up. But I'm not prepared to have the 2 or 3 hour bathroom discussion right now. And then eventually, and he typically could tell, and then eventually when it would come out and I'd be like, we need to talk, we'd get in the bathroom and he'd be like, I knew it was coming. I was just giving it time to come. And I'm just like, I am sick of having this conversation, the same conversation over and over. But look, in the grand scheme of life, 5 years, 6 years of putting in all that hard work it's not that too much. It's not too much to ask.
It's easy to say no.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But looking back on it, it's like you have to remember why you started. You have to remember to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And when you're in the thick of it, it's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah.
But that's why it's important to have community. So you can see people that have went through it and say, oh man, I can feel where you're at. And it's so just icky.
Yeah.
But you will get through it.
Sharing hope.
Yeah. You will get through it. You will get through it. You just can't give up.
Yeah, and I want to encourage whoever gets an opportunity to listen to this, if you are struggling with liking your stepkids, I encourage you to try and change your attitude about it.
Yeah.
Honestly, remember that we are the adult. We are the adult. The children is most likely, maybe they are spoiled, maybe they're brats, maybe so. But what a great opportunity for you as a parent to help offer some real good guidance in this situation in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Not in, I'm going to take this role into my hands and do something about it, but an opportunity to really come to your spouse and really come together and make some real good, healthy decisions moving forward that's going to benefit your family as a whole, So be encouraged by other people's stories like us. Yeah, it took us years to figure it out. It doesn't always take that long. For some, it takes longer.
Yeah.
We don't know, but be encouraged that if you do the things right in the beginning, even though it's hard, difficult, ugly, uncomfortable, if you do it anyway, it will pay off. It pays off big if you just put in the work and the time early on.
I can tell you that the people that are more humble and don't struggle with pride, it comes a lot quicker. So the more prideful you are
Yeah.
and the less humble you are, the longer it's going to take. Because that's any marriage, let alone a blended family. And both him and I were very stubborn. We are very stubborn people, and we can struggle with our own pride of just wanting to be right or wanting to be heard.
Yeah.
And I know it's cliche, but a lot of times we listen to respond and not listen to understand. And that is a huge key thing with your spouse. You really need to be listening to them to understand their viewpoint. Put yourself in their shoes. What are they dealing with? And if they do have kids, reverse it. What if their kids had did that to you? How would you respond? And don't lie to yourself.
Yeah. Be honest.
So that's an empathy and an understanding and wanting your marriage to be successful and your family to be successful and to have those kids grow up to be God-loving, God-fearing members of society. It's important.
You want your children to grow up and understand that marriage is compromise, family's compromise.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean compromise in spite of, right? We don't have to treat ourselves that way to say, well, my compromise is just be able to let this other person and their kids do whatever it is that they want. No. It's understanding healthy conflict resolution, having healthy communication, and saying, hey, we need to meet in the middle on this. Where is a middle? Because typically in a situation of parents, one person's more aggressive than the other. Okay. Unfortunately, in our situation, we're both pretty darn aggressive. Okay.
I was just thinking like, who?
Yeah.
Ours.
We are both pretty aggressive, but the beautiful thing that God has really shown us in our own marriage is each of us are soft at different times in our relationship, and we've been soft at different times, and it's been super helpful. And we've respected each other in that journey. So it's, understand that what God's trying to tell you in your current family. Don't think that it's about the other children and that you don't like them or that you dislike them. Think about what it is that you can pour into your marriage and into your family to make things work in a positive way. And that's typically some form of compromise.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes, I agree.
All right, we want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast of ours. If it's something that you do like and you haven't had an opportunity yet, please hit the share button. We also want to let you know that we do one-day conferences, which is more of a 2-hour conference, so it's evening conferences. So it's called Perfectly Blended. So if you go to perfectlyblendedevent.com, you can check us out. And if it's something you want to come to your church, please let us know. And that's all we got. So we want to let you guys know we're here live every Tuesday at 7. We can see you guys next week.
Bye.